Recording in progress.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I got a bit of echo. I'm gonna have to work with me on that this morning. I want to welcome you guys over. I'm gonna do this just because it's gonna be weird. Can I get you guys to kind of shift over here? Can you just get everybody to kind of shift right there? That would be very, very helpful. If I can just get y'all to shift over here, then I can just look in one direction. Appreciate each and one of you. We do have a few new faces here, and I'm glad that you guys are here. This is very, very, very important work that we're doing. Welcome to, this is one of our sister churches. We've done these events at 3 churches. Before we get started, we always start with a moment of silence. We have had a tremendous, traumatic weekend in this city. We've had over 6 homicides, and if you count the 14-year-old young man that in the car, that's 7 since Friday. That is very, very, very traumatic situation. Our city is truly, I'm sorry. Is that going to disrupt the feedback because you're echoing? I understand that. Yeah. No, we're fine. We're fortunately, we are trying to do some very innovative. You just don't know. Thank you so much for just bearing with us, and forgive me, you won't hear that long because I won't be the one doing majority of the speaking. The majority of the speaking, the reason you're getting that is because we're streaming to the City Council YouTube page. And in order for the people on YouTube to hear us, they got to hear us through that microphone. But then we're also trying to let you hear us as well. That's what's causing some of the feedback. But our presenter today is presenting all the way from California. So you will be hearing his voice. That echo will go away. He will be doing the majority of the conversation talk today. All right. But once again, I would just ask if you would, before I introduce the pastor of this church, I want you to just have a moment of silence with me as we honor and remember the families impacted by the violence we've had over this weekend, the families that have been impacted historically over the violence that we've had, the intentional, what we're saying in the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, the intentional trafficking of guns that is happening in our cities, in our communities, that is impacting our children and our families, and then those, of course, who are also victims of it and traumatized by this as well. A moment of silence, if you don't mind, please, sir, please, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. I want to take the opportunity to introduce the pastor of this church, Pastor Jonathan Williams, who's in the back right here, who's opened up his doors to us. We have had a pretty long day today, ladies and gentlemen. We have one of my deacons at my church passed away, transitioned, and we had his service on today. So we have been really, really active since about 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm just leaving the church a few minutes ago. But nonetheless, he's a wonderful service, and I'm glad we're able to be here. And all of you are here. I see some great friends, Patricia Williams McGee in the back. So good to see you, and all of you that have come out. We have some new faces with us, some new partners with us, and we thank you for being a part of this. We have some information that we want to make sure all of you get a copy of. Kathy, if you don't mind, passing on what this information is, first of all, the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition has a community solution and action plan. We came together last year. Once again, my name is Councilman Willie Lightfoot, Councilman at Large and Chairman of the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition. This is Dassy. She's part of our staff for City Council. That's Kathy, who's helping pass it out, who's also one of our she works on our advocacy committee, and she's one of our partners. Some of our other partners are here too. Reverend Cox, we appreciate you and all of you that are here and been consistently coming and supporting this work and these efforts. So the solution action plan was done by the community. We introduced this last year. It's a community-driven plan, 12-point plan. out of that plan, one of the other things that we did was the Brady Gun Trace Data Report. That Brady Gun Trace Data Report, we're one of only two cities, three other states, but one of the 5 communities that has such a report. That report is a North Star that's guiding us to fill some gaps in regards to crime guns in the city of Rochester. As a result of that, the way we want tonight to go, we're going to show you a video that's about 8 minutes. After that video, we'll have Kathy will come up and will introduce Steve Lindley, our expert from Brady, who will be doing a presentation to you. Then we'll take any questions and comments you have. Once again, this is being shared on the City Council YouTube page. This is the 3rd community truth behind crime guns in Rochester, New York. And this is very important information that's really, truly looking at some gaps in the entire process of gun violence intervention, prevention, and how we enforcement of dealing with gun violence within our community. We believe that we have, through the data, have identified some gaps in areas that we can create another tool to help us in this gun violence. So at this time, I'll have the folks queue up the tape, the video, and we'll show this video.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to Rochester in Focus. I'm Lynette Adams. Coming up on the show today, we're following up to a recent report by the Brady campaign, which takes a look at crime guns in Rochester. City Council member Willie Lightfoot is here to talk about it. Also, we're talking with the producers of the annual Rock Summer Soul Festival. The city recently announced the lineup for this summer, but we talk about some changes and why the promoters book certain artists. And finally, we're talking with Annette and Carmelo Ramos, an award-winning local couple making a difference in the arts and community service. Well, our first guest is Rochester City Councilmember Willie Lightfoot. He wears a lot of hats in this town. One of them, chair of the city's Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, which has worked to end gun violence in the city since 2018 by bringing attention to the causes and effects of gun violence. Welcome to you this morning.
Thank you. Welcome, Annette. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I want to talk about this recent report that you released last week. This is about crime guns. What are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about crime guns from a very different perspective of approaching dealing with eradicating and preventing violence, gun violence within our city. This report, the Brady historical report that was done for the city of Rochester, the first time ever that the city of Rochester had such a report, that we released actually last year. We released the report in 2023. Now we're coming back a year later after we've done our Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition Solution Action Plan, and we're saying to the community, hey, we really believe that kind of the report kind of went over people's head a little bit. It's a lot of data. It's a 30-page report. The report was done for free from Brady National. Didn't cost the taxpayers a dime, but it will pay dividends when it comes to saving lives in our community. So we've come back now last week and we're saying, hey, we broke the report down to key points that we really believe that people need to really understand about this report. And now we're having 3 sessions, community-driven sessions, across the city in different quadrants. Last week was our first of 3 that we had on the Northeast. Then the following week, we will have another one in the Southwest area, and then we'll finish in the Northwest with our last one on May 7th. This gives the community an opportunity. They're both in-person and hybrid meetings to where we can really break down the impact of this report and how we're going to utilize this data to help us prevent future gun violence in our city.
Well, let's talk about some of the findings. I know you can't go over the entire report, but some of the key findings that came out of this report.
So just some of this data, out of the state gun dealers representing 57% of the crime guns recovered, in New York State gun dealers represent 43% of all crime guns recovered in Rochester. This is a homegrown problem we have in Rochester. Out of 21 gun dealers account for 40% of Rochester's short time to crime guns. That is a staggering among the top 30 crime gun suppliers who sold the most crime guns, Monroe County gun dealers had the highest percentage of crime guns sold, 53%. So almost 50% of the crime guns that we're finding ending up trafficked on the city, on our streets of our community, and taking lives of our citizens, and causing all of this trauma within our community is coming from 10% of the gun dealers, and majority of them are in Monroe County.
So you mean these guns that are being used on the streets to do illegal acts are coming from gun dealers, people who sell guns at stores, legitimate stores right here in our community?
That's absolutely correct. And the report,
How is that happening?
the interesting thing about the report, and I'll answer that. Interesting thing about the report is it showed us that, and then like 2 days before we released the report last year, ATF made us redact the names. We actually have the names of the gun dealers in the unredacted report. And the reason that report was redacted because of a federal law called the TR law, which forbids them from sharing certain information. We differ in opinion on that TR law. We feel that all of this information, which is evidence, should be open to the public and should be transparent to the public. Look at the 2 officers that were just murdered in Syracuse. Imagine now if we traced that gun, where did that gun come from, and how the time of crime, and find out where the dealer that gun came from. We have Officer Merkowitz. We have the 2 firefighters that were killed in Webster. That gun, and you ask, how does this happen? That rifle was bought through a straw purchase. Someone else went in that's able to buy a gun, purchase the gun, and then sell it or give it to someone else. A lot of this is done through straw purchasing. It's done through stolen guns, from people who it's done for dealers who claim that they've had thievery or theft in their places, and they're not operating properly. So that's what's happening. We have a homegrown problem here. A lot of our guns do come from out of state, but the majority of our crime guns are coming from right here in Monroe County. And I want to make this distinction. We have no gun dealers in the city of Rochester, 0.
So then you're saying these guns are coming from dealers who are in suburban areas
Absolutely.
or rural areas?
Absolutely, yes.
It's startling.
It is.
So where do we begin to go after this problem?
So the recommendations that Brady have, and they're very clear recommendations, is first, our inspections has to be enforced. We have to be inspecting these places more. Most of these gun dealers only get inspected 1 time every 10 years. That's ridiculous, right? So most of these cities, Rochester is only 1 of 5 cities that has this gun trace data report. Chicago, New York City, California, Pennsylvania. We're the only mid-sized city that has this report. The coalition fought very hard, worked with 2 mayors, Mayor Lovely Warren, Mayor Evans, very supportive. Our police department has been very supportive, which is unusual with this type of work. But we have to be, there's different recommendations we're looking at implementing. We have to have better oversight and inspections of these gun dealers. We need to make all of them comply with the New York State Gun Dealers Code of Conduct. We're not trying to shut down legal businesses, but we expect that if you're going to do business with such dangerous work, right, with these guns, then you ought to be doing it properly. Also, we need to look at our federal leaders and say, hey, that TR law needs to be repealed. It needs to be changed, because this information should be public, right? And when we can begin to track the crime of guns and trace it to the dealers, and then if we have dealers, and most of the dealers are doing a great job, but that 10% are causing a lot of these issues and problems, and they're going unchecked or unaccountable, and they need to be made accountable because the carnage. And when you look at the situation for African Americans, it is extremely staggering, because Black youth are more than 11 times likely to die from firearm homicide. Hispanic and Latino youth are 2.5 times more likely to die from firearm homicide than their white peers. So this problem is trafficking these guns into the community are impacting Black and brown people more than other cultures.
Wow. This is startling. I really didn't expect this, but we've got to keep talking about it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But will you come back and
Absolutely.
talk more about this? So
Yes.
we can get to the bottom of it?
Absolutely.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Council Member Willie Lightfoot, thank you very much for joining us. Coming up, we sit down with the
All right.
of the Rock Summer Soul Festival. You may be
You-
surprised
yeah, you-
by what goes into the selection of artists.
We can get back to Steve. So, again, I apologize for the echo. What I would say to you, when I did this interview, many of you know Channel 10 weather guy. The weather guy walked me out to my car. And the same papers that I've given you of key findings, he was so amazed and informed. It's like he really was grasping the fact that over 50% of these crime guns are coming from Monroe County. That really was staggering to him. And he said more of us, especially us suburbians, have to pay attention to that. We have to be understanding of what's really going on around that and how the intentional this trafficking is happening within our community. And so that's one of the missions of our coalition, is to inform, which empowers this community to take back our community and to realize the importance of this work. So at this time, we're going to go a little bit further. I'm going to ask Kathy if she would come introduce Steve Lindley, and then Steve will take us through a presentation, and then we'll take any questions from you. We plan to be out within about an hour full time. Thank you so much.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening to help us uncover the truth about Rochester's crime guns. On behalf of Brady, I would like to thank Mayor Evans, former Mayor Warren, President Miguel Melendez, and the Rochester City Council, all our law enforcement partners, faith leaders, and to you, the Rochester community, for what you're doing to help prevent gun violence. I'm deeply grateful to Brady for their incredible generosity in producing this gun trace report. You can find this on the City of Rochester website, and I urge you to take a look at it. Brady's especially thankful for the extraordinary leadership of Rochester City Councilman Willie Lightfoot. He is the founder of the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, but he's also the steward of this report. Without his leadership, we would not have this gun trace report. So tonight we're here to talk about evidence. Evidence of harm being inflicted on Rochester. That's what this report is. This is evidence. We're also here to talk about truth that remains hidden from the community. Redacted truths, suppressed evidence that leaves the public feeling confused and to some extent subjugated to this harm being inflicted over and over and over again. This is a harm that was identified for the gun manufacturing industry. The gun manufacturing industry knows who the supply sources are for the crime guns recovered in Rochester. They know. And yet, the gun manufacturers continue to supply these dealers with more guns. This is a harm that was identified for ATF. ATF knows who the dealers are who are supplying the crime guns to Rochester. They know. Yet, these dealers continue to be licensed to operate, despite numerous federal law violations and despite the fact that their license is contingent on them following the law. This is a harm that was traced to supply sources that likely remain open, in business, and capable of inflicting more harm. So we say to our ATF, follow the evidence. Shut down these dangerous gun dealers. End their tyranny of unlawful distribution of guns, harming our families. Shut down the dangerous dealers who are responsible for unexplained losses of guns, dealers who are the supply source for homicide guns that are used to murder our police officers, dealers who fail to conduct a background check, dealers who sell volumes of handguns that they are mandated to report and don't report, dealers who sell volumes of handguns that they know or should know are going to be diverted for gun trafficking, dealers who sell guns in straw purchases that are used to murder our firefighters, our youth. Follow the evidence in our gun trace report without fear, without favor. We say to our leaders, if a child has to live under curfew and grow up under a state of emergency, crouching behind the living room sofa to dodge the bullets flying through the street, if a father can be murdered on his way to visiting his daughter for Easter dinner, then surely a gun dealer with 20 crime gun traces can manage to be inspected comprehensively once a year and can be mandated to submit a quarterly inventory report to the state police and to the ATF. If a family should be forced to bear a lifetime of sorrow, burying their murdered loved one, visiting them annually in the cemetery, if our children must grow up rehearsing for gun violence trauma in their school, crouching under the desk, hiding in the closet, to shield themselves from bullets being fired at them in their classrooms, then surely gun dealers with violent crime gun traces and homicide gun traces can be held to rigorous, comprehensive inspections and security and record-keeping standards with strong regulatory mandates, because their mistakes are our gun violence tragedies. Their breaches of public trust through their straw purchases, reckless sales, unlawful distribution of guns, and dangerous practices. They are our gun violence funerals. They are our gun violence burials of our law enforcement, our firefighters, our youth, our loved ones. So tonight we have with us Steve Lindley. He's a national expert from Brady. He travels across the US, helping communities like Rochester uncover their truths about crime guns. Steve has decades of law enforcement experience, as well as working with Brady's Combating Crime Guns initiative. He spent 3 decades working on state and federal legislative and regulatory efforts. And he has served at the National Police Department in San Diego and the California Department of Justice, including as director for the Justice Bureau of Firearms and the Division of Law Enforcement, with over 1,100 agents and professional staff under his leadership. We're blessed to have Steve's knowledge, his dedication, and commitment to helping Rochester create crime gun prevention strategies to protect our community, to save lives. So it's an honor now to welcome Steve Lindley to Rochester.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to thank you. I want to thank Councilmember Lightfoot and also Mayor Evans for their leadership on this issue and pushing the report forward. Give me a second to share my screen. And we can move forward. So this is a report about the firearms that have been traced by the city of Rochester that goes back roughly a decade. First, we want to talk about what is a firearm trace report and why is it important not only to the federal government, but to the community at large. First off, it identifies a gun's sequence of ownership, oftentimes from the manufacturer to a wholesaler to a dealer and to the first person that possessed and purchased that firearm. Most cryo guns start off in the legal market. They have to be manufactured someplace, and then they're sold. They're coming from legal purchases or what a dealer might believe is a legal purchase. And it also identifies what dealers act as suppliers of crime guns. For the most part, most firearm dealers do a very good job. They follow the rules, they follow the law. However, it only takes a couple of bad dealers in order to flood the community with crime guns. So if you look at the different trace reports that have been out recently, and this probably goes back about a decade, is you have the state of Pennsylvania produced one. You have the state of New York. You have California that does one annually now because of the laws out here in California. You have the city of Chicago that has done several, and you have the city of Rochester. So the city of Rochester is among just a few entities in the United States that has pushed forward a firearm trace report to try and identify where the firearms are coming into the community and analyze that information. Knowledge is power when it comes to the source of firearms. Stopping the flow of firearms from certain dealers is not necessarily going to stop crime or firearm crime in the community, but it is a good source of limiting what criminals have access to when it comes to firearms. So this is part of our the Brady's supply side solutions, is not just looking at what law enforcement or the community can do in that particular community, person by person or event by event to stop crime, specifically gun crime, but looking at what are the sources of those crime guns. So this improves dealer business practices. Again, most dealers do a very good job. Some maybe not as much, but maybe as a lack of education or lack of oversight. Some just break the law. It's crucial to hold gun dealers accountable for their sale practices. Again, most are doing a good job, but it only takes a few to really cause a major problem. It also shifts the burden of preventing gun violence away from the community and look at the source of these firearms, the dealers and the manufacturers. And we're looking at education and compliance for these dealers and for these manufacturers, not necessarily running them out of business. We want them to comply with the laws on the books and understand that the products that they're selling if they're selling them illegally or fraudulently, that has consequences to the community. And those consequences are oftentimes very dire. So looking at the crime guns recovered in the city of Rochester, we looked at 10 years of data that was provided by the police department. Overall, the police department has done an excellent job in tracing firearms over the past decade. With that, over 6,000 firearms have been recovered in the city of Rochester. Handgun recoveries rose dramatically over the past decade from 57% in 2012 to 83% in 2022. Now, if you look at the amount of handguns that are recovered nationally, there is a dramatic increase. Maybe not to this degree, but criminals tend to use handguns more than they use shotguns or rifles. Also, Saturday night specials, the cheaply poor quality firearms recoveries went down, but unfortunately, ghost gun recoveries went up. And that is the new source of cheap, easily manufactured, easily procured firearms. And we can talk about that a little bit later. So over 5,000 guns were traced to a dealer. These guns were originally sold by over 2,100 different firearm dealers. Nearly 1,700 dealers had only one firearm traced to them, and the average number of traces per dealer is a little bit over 2 firearms. So what that really kind of identifies is most dealers are doing their job. It's very difficult for a dealer not to have one firearm traced, because firearms can, as we'll talk about a little bit later, can last decades in circulation. So what this is doing is it just identifies that most dealers are doing their job very well and aren't part of the problem. Again, nearly 1,700 dealers only had one firearm traced during that 10 years of data that we looked at. 55% of the crime guns traced were sold by just 10% of those 2,100 dealers. So again, if you're looking at the problem really starts to shrink. We need better compliance, better education, and maybe better enforcement of a very small number of firearm dealers. 61% were traced to an original sale by a dealer that's still in business. Again, firearms can last, if they're properly maintained, can last decades in circulation. So when you look at how many dealers are still in business that sold those firearms, again, over half of them are still in business during that 10-year period. 39% were traced to an original sale by a dealer who is no longer in business. That's the opposite end of the 61%. And again, guns can remain in circulation for years, realistically for decades or longer. So if we can identify just those dealers in the last 10 years that are causing the problem, it not only is a solution for today, but could be a solution for the next 10, 20 years. Recommendations that were made. So the original report actually had a lot more information in it, and that was going to be disclosed to the public. Unfortunately, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms redacted a lot of the information that was going to be released to the public because of the Tier-Hart Amendment, which we'll talk about in a moment. However, city officials and the police department do have the unredacted information, and they have the sources that they can go after. So with that in mind, we made recommendations to the city and to the police department for things that they can do in order to put the trace report to good use and start identifying these dealers and deal with them. So first off, is just continue efforts in tracing crime guns and analyzing crime gun data. The police department has been doing an excellent job of that going back 10 years. And knowledge is power, not only for the police department, the city, but if we can get this information disclosed to the public, knowledge is power to the public. It helps the public, helps the citizens. It helps you make good decisions about what you want your city to do. Regulation, training, oversight, and enforcement of firearm dealers. So the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, they conduct inspections of firearm dealers nationwide. However, because of the lack of resources that ATF has and the number of firearm dealers that are across the nation, dealers oftentimes only get inspected once every 10 years. A lot can change in 10 years. If you think about where any of us were 10 years ago, our lives might be dramatically different 10 years ago, and they're probably going to be dramatically different 10 years from now. So, and every 10-year inspection is just not feasible in order to identify problematic dealers and deal with them. So you can look at not only state, but local inspections. State of New York does have a firearm dealer inspection process, but local inspections, at least on the county level, can be very very helpful in identifying problematic dealers early on and changing their sales behavior. Firearm dealers adopt a code of conduct. Brady campaign has a code of conduct. State of New York does for the dealers, but that's just basically identifying a kind of better business practices that they can implement above and beyond what they're required to do by local, county, or state law. It holds them accountable, saying, you know what, we want to be part of the solution to this while still selling firearms instead of being part of the problem by selling firearms. Procurement policies. This is where your tax dollars come into effect. police departments, law enforcement throughout the nation or in any particular community, along with just government entities, purchase a lot of equipment, firearms, and ammunition from dealers. Some of these firearm dealers are problematic dealers. So why should taxpayer money go towards dealers that aren't following the basic laws of the community, of the state, or the federal government? So it's putting into policies in the police department or just in the city to making sure that who they're doing business with is a good business that's following the rules and has a code of conduct and is trying to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And then we have destruction policies. So recently, a New York Times report identified a number of agencies that when they were destroying crime guns, that they were going through companies that actually parted out these firearms and only destroying the pieces that were mandated under either state or federal law. So what was left behind were these firearm part kits, which is a key component in ghost guns. So what the police departments are basically doing is they're putting a large portion of these firearms right back on the streets. So policies that are being brought up in different cities is the firearms need to be completely destroyed, and that has to be witnessed by law enforcement officials to attest that those firearms that were recovered were actually destroyed completely. Finally, repeal the Tier-Hart Amendment. The Tier-Hart Amendment was a budget rider in the early 2000s that basically took away a lot of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms' ability to provide information to the public. It was a pro-gun industry amendment, basically saying that ATF can't share firearm trace information with the public, which they'd been doing for decades before this. Again, why would somebody be afraid of open government, transparency, and providing knowledge and information and data to our citizens? Again, this isn't secret information. It doesn't deal with the foreign government. It just deals with what firearm dealers are causing problems in the United States and have the most firearms traced to them. Again, the initial report that Brady provided the city of Rochester had all that information in it, but it was eventually redacted by ATF. So repealing the Tier-Hart Amendment is not only a city of Rochester or state of New York issue, but it is a national issue. And we need to repeal the Tier-Hart Amendment and allow ATF to provide the information to the citizens. We're paying for this information. We should have access to it. And at one time we did. Finally, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. That's a bit of a pun intended. But you don't need to be a firearm expert to care about or be part of gun violence prevention. Oftentimes, the gun industry will talk and tell people, well, you're not an expert, so why are you telling me what to do? Well, you don't have to be an expert to see what happens on the streets of Rochester or New York or Philadelphia or Los Angeles. And you don't need an expert to come up with solutions to prevent that type of gun violence. Again, a lot of the greatest ideas that come about with violence prevention comes from the local communities because they're the ones that are adversely affected by it. So that's my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions. Again, I just want to thank Kathy. I want to thank Councilmember Lightfoot and Mayor Evans for their leadership here. I also want to thank the police department for their cooperation and just for the fact that they've been doing a very good job tracing firearms for the past decade that allowed us to crunch the numbers and provide this report to the city of Rochester.
All right. Testing. All right, Steve, are you still able to hear us okay?
Yes, just a little echo.
Wonderful. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, come on up, or comments or.
I have about 4 questions. I don't need one. Thank you. You don't need to feel pressure to answer them right now because I don't expect
can you hear her, Steve? Because he's from California, he's on Zoom, so you might have to speak through the microphone so he can.
No, it's hard to hear.
He said it's hard.
So Steve, I said I have 4 questions. You don't need to feel inclined to answer them immediately, nor do I expect an immediate answer. Some of them, I know the answer to, they're more of a rhetorical question, but it's to get not only you, but the people here thinking about it. But feel free to write them down as well. But my first question is, how do you differentiate the crime gun dealers, and I put up the quote, the manufacturers, et cetera, from the non-crime gun producers and distributors? That's my first question. My second one is, do you include gun violence inflicted upon the citizens at the hands of the police in your data? That's my second question. Or excuse me, I actually have 5. The third is, do you include suicides by guns, which is the leading death amongst white men nationally, according to a book called Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metzl? My fourth question, do the crime guns consist of solely guns involved in crime, or also guns that were willingly turned in for, say, a deceased firearm holder and firearms that were once legally possessed? And then my last question is, what is your data based on, being that the Dickey Amendment prohibits governmental funding of research to find the causes of said gun violence and the solutions? And you mentioned an amendment that needed repealing, but the Dickey Amendment is also an amendment that needs repealing. And I encourage those who aren't familiar to research it.
We appreciate that.
So those are all excellent questions.
They were. Give her a good, that's good stuff. I'm so glad you brought that to the space. Go ahead, Steve.
So I was actually going to ask her if now that she asked those, let's go over them one at a time. If she could repeat her first question, and we'll go and I'll give her answers to each one of those.
First question, repeat it. Thank you so much. First question, repeat it. How do you differentiate crime gun dealers, manufacturers, etc., from non-crime gun producers and distributors?
Excellent question, and it talks about just how the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms traces a firearm. So let's say that, and I'm just going to pick on Smith & Wesson because they're one of the oldest manufacturers around. A police department picks up a Smith & Wesson handgun at a robbery scene. Obviously, they know that it came from Smith & Wesson because it's marked as Smith & Wesson, and it has the model number and the serial number. They can go to Smith & Wesson, who is obligated to keep records of all the firearms that they have manufactured, along with their serial numbers and where they went to. So whether that firearm goes from Smith & Wesson to a wholesaler or Smith & Wesson directly to a dealer, that starts the kind of the chain of custody from manufacturer to wholesaler to dealer. So the only firearms that ATF is going to be tracing are ones that fit the criteria under federal law for it being a crime gun. They would not necessarily be tracing a non-crime gun. However, obviously, the number of crime guns that are collected in a given year in the United States as compared to the number that are manufactured, there's a vast difference with that. We're not collecting all guns that are used in crimes, only the ones that law enforcement actually were able to recover. And that's the difference between the numbers. However, a lot of manufacturers will not tell you the number of firearms that they actually manufacture on any given year.
Second question, Steve, and we're going to incorporate your questions into our solution action plan. I took a picture, I got you, so we're going to make sure that we incorporate that into the plan. Do you include gun violence inflicted by police in your data?
In this particular report, no, that was not part of, we weren't tracing back the manufacturer of firearms that were used by law enforcement. However, there are statistics that does include the use of violence by law enforcement with firearms in their data statistics. And that is something that we do need to look at on a national basis, is the use of firearms by law enforcement and also identifying less lethal means of force for law enforcement.
that's gonna be even more staggering. That's gonna be even more staggering once we gonna put that in the pot too. We're gonna put that in the pot. Do you include suicide by guns, which is the leading death among white men nationally, according to a book called Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metzels?
So if you look at the national statistics of firearm violence, suicide is included in use of or included as firearm violence. And it is something that is a little more predominant in the white community. But in this statistical report, it would depend on whether that firearm was classified as by the Rochester Police Department as being used in a crime.
All right. Do the crime guns consist of solely guns involved in crime or also guns that were willingly turned in for, say, and deceased firearm holders and firearms legally possessed?
No, the crime gun data should only be used from firearms that the police department have traced. And again, ATF has strict criteria about what is considered a crime gun. So a firearm that is, let's say, brought in to the police department by a citizen saying, I just want it destroyed, I don't want it anymore, should not be included in this data. Or if it's some type of community gun buyback, should not be part of a trace report, and that firearm should never be traced in the first place.
All right. What is your data based on, being that the Dickey Amendment prohibits governmental funding for research to find the causes of said gun violence and solutions? This amendment needs repealing as well.
So this information was provided to the city of Rochester, to the police department, based on the information of the firearms that they had requested traces on as part of ATF's trace report program. That information, after some legal wranglings and confidentiality agreements, was provided to the Brady campaign for us to basically crunch the numbers. Yes, the lack of funding to government entities, specifically the Centers for Disease Control, for proper firearm research is a problem that has slowly been lifted over the last few years, and they are getting some funding for firearm violence prevention. But if you look at, again, I'm going to be a little bit biased towards California. California has made its own laws when it came to making sure that our researchers here in California have open access to the data that's controlled by the California Department of Justice, and the state of California is paying for research to be done on a number of gun violence prevention issues. So that's something where the leadership in New York can also look at funding universities and different researchers to identify gun violence prevention issues, especially if the federal government is unable or unwilling to do that.
All right. We have time maybe for one more question. We'll have two more and three more. And then we're gonna, just for the sake of, I'd like to be respectful of your time. So we'll start 1, 2, and then we'll end with my gentleman right here.
Steve, my comment is, because I'm coming from a different standpoint, from the kingdom of God, he said, "What thou shalt not kill." And everything that I hear you say about our white community, black community, all of y'all are wrong, because God created man in his image, all of us. So there is no black race, there's no white race. It's called the human race. And what I have experienced with 6 children in the city of Rochester, you live in California, I have lived here for 48 years in my community. I grew up on the west side when my mother first came from Dayton, Ohio. And when me and my husband raised our 6 children in God's house, we raised them. We've seen, and they can attest to this, the inner city court stores selling illegal guns. So it's not just about the gun license ones. You need to go after the ones that come in And my question is that, oh, I feel God on this. You're going after the little man. You need to go after the man the smuggler, the one that's smuggling the guns and the drugs. And we're not talking about the brown man. We're talking about the KKK, the white supremacists. He's the one smuggling the drugs in the city of Rochester. That's my question.
So that's what this process actually is. It's not going after the local seller of that illegal firearm. It's coming from the source of those. Again, as stated before, almost every crime gun starts as a legal firearm, whether that's at the manufacturer side, the wholesaler, or the dealer. And that's what we're looking at, is holding the people that are upstream, the people that are making money off of the violence in any particular city, holding them accountable for not only following the law, but making sure that they push beyond that, so that they're not producing problems in any one specific community. And that is part of the supply side of looking at gun violence prevention.
I just want to say thank you again, Councilman Lightfoot, for putting together another forum. For us to come and ask questions, be informed. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kathy, for all the work. I know you've been working hard. I have a couple of questions. One of them is about funding for educational program. I see with the gun tracing, they're focusing on the instrument, which is the gun, and the manufacturers. But what about the hands that the guns end up into? Because I believe culturally, we don't teach our kids gun safety, and it's like a taboo thing that they look up to, they listen to rap songs, right? And they always talk about the different six hours, the Glock, and all these different things. But kids in the white community, their parents teach them. They teach them how to hunt. They teach them how to dismantle a gun and how to clean it. And I think with that education, then that thing that they held in such high regard, it's not dangling. And now we know what it does. We know it's there for harm or for safety. And so I think that can reduce some of the crimes that we see in our community. My second question is.
Can we get to the first one before we get too far? Yeah, so the first one I would say this, I agree, this. That's okay. Sorry about that. The first one, I'd say I agree, but I would add to that, I'll offer to share to that. This conversation, and what I'm learning from these conversations, brothers and sisters, is that we need to have more of these conversations. That's what I just learned, really. Doing these are healing places for us, and we're just not having these conversations enough. We started the conversation very narrow, if you will, just talking about crime guns. But we're noticing as we unpeel these layers of this conversation, because it's so traumatic for our community, that we're going into other spaces. And that's why the coalition, the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, doesn't have a myopic view. We have a holistic view. We have an education committee, which you've sat on before. We have a youth committee. We're getting ready to have a big youth conference in July. We are addressing this from a holistic approach. This particular conversation for these conferences or these sessions, these community sessions, birth out of the truth behind the data report on crime guns. So yes, we need to address the educational piece in the solution action plan. There's 12 solutions in this plan. Hopefully all of you have a copy. If you don't, make sure you get it when you leave. We address education. We address every level, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm not scared of nobody. I'm gonna just go and tell the truth. You know, one area that we're not talking about that my sister just brought up is the home. The home. We just had 11-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old. To me, that's a home problem. Because I wasn't out at 11 and 14 years. I wasn't stealing no cars at 14, so I was afraid of what my daddy was gonna do to me when I got home. That's a home problem that we don't want to talk, nobody want to talk about that. Okay, but we got to talk about all of it.
if we really gonna get to dealing with this violence and what's happening in our community. So absolutely, yes, that's a part of our plan. This ain't the plan to fix all the problems. No, but what we're saying is we came to the community and said, hey, what can we do? Where can we start? Let's do something. We ain't gonna sit on our hands and just letting this be normalized and just act like this church should be full. We get more people to come to a city council meeting to talk about dogs and cats in the animal shelter than we do about people's lives in this community. That's a fact. Am I telling the truth? Mr. Lieutenant, Vincent, he's the head of security for the city. He's at every council meeting and speak to council. We get more people at speak to council to talk about dogs and cats. I got a dog. I love dogs. Love animals. Nothing against animals, but human lives, right? But people get on TV, and when the cameras are rolling, do all this camera action stuff. This ain't what we about here in the coalition. We've been doing this for 7 years, non-stop, ongoing, because we want to come up with solutions to fix this problem. So not getting on my soapbox, but yes, we got to do that too. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Because a part of your gun crime data, I'm sure, is accidental firearms. That's if you know how to handle a weapon, it won't accidentally go off. So it's not just educational.
But that's still education though. All of it's education. Because if you're teaching me something that I don't know, then that's education. So everything goes back to education, everything. People perish for the lack of what? Knowledge, right? So not to push back, I'm not passing it off, I'm agreeing, right? And let me give you another piece to that too. Not only do we educate them on the proper use, how about we educate people on how to become legal gun owners? How about that? Why? Instead, you don't have to carry an illegal gun. You can carry a legal gun. And here's how you do it, right? And then let's look at the data on how many people are getting denied legal guns in our criminal justice from our judges that are getting denied that look like Black and brown people. When we heard KKK, we heard other people, but they're allowed to have tons of guns. What are the disparities there too? So there's this is a complicated, very, very, but for me and what I'm committed to is committing to deal with the elephant in the room. I'm committed to continuing these conversations, and I'm committed to working with the community on solutions. Because we all know what the problems are. I'm tired of talking about the problems. You know, I'm really, yeah, I agree. And so and I don't, and one other thing is, we're not going to get anywhere in conflict with each other. That's what's already happening. Majority of the crime and violence that's happening in our communities is disputes that aren't being settled properly. Two people disputing that settle it in violence. And you went there, you took us there, right? You said that's spirit, well, that's spiritual, right? That's spiritual, that we can't deal with conflict without running into violence. Part two of your question, I'm sorry. We gotta move.
Part two quickly. I don't know if this infringes on constitutional rights, but chips are in everything. As much as we hate it, is there a way to do that without infringing on constitutional rights from the manufacturer's end? And part two of that is it an expectation? Yeah, is there expectation? Is it a feasible expectation for manufacturers to incorporate these chips into some parts of the guns during assembly? As much as people hate to admit it, if you got a phone, you're already being tracked, so there's that.
Steve, you want to talk about chips being in guns and is that not constitutional, et cetera?
So, and we are the Constitution, so, we can always change it. But when it comes to manufacturers and changing some of their policies, I'll bring up what California initially has done, and then what is being done in New Jersey and in New York when it comes to microstamping the firing pins of firearms. So, yeah, I've been dealing with that since 2007, and manufacturers have basically had a temper tantrum over not wanting to do that, even though it is proven that it, one, will work, and two, it'll help identify the firearms that are used in crime. So still, the law's been on the book here for 17 years in California, and there's not a single manufacturer that has done it. Last couple of years, both New York and New Jersey have also put in to affect microstamping laws, and again, we don't see a change in the manufacturers. So the chipping of a firearm could be a good idea, but we have to have a lot of leverage with the manufacturers for them to be able to do it, unless it's going to be done on a national level. And I just don't see our current Congress having the leadership in order to put forward microstamping, let alone putting forward some type of chipping of firearms so they can be located.
Thank you. I'm moving to the gentleman here, and then we gotta move. I'm sorry. We gotta get out. We have a certain limited amount of time.
This question takes it back to the data. So data is only powerful when you interpret it and do something with it. And a lot of the data already shows that on the tail end, it's affecting a particular race. I am former military as well. What I did with all that information is I feel targeted. And so my question is, in your trace reports, is the race, the supply, manufacturer, the people in Monroe County, they all have to fill out the race when they start their business. Is that being tracked?
So I wouldn't say it's being tracked as a column of data, but if you look at the locations that the firearms are coming from, or the communities that the firearms are coming from, and where they're ending up, I think you can make your own conclusion that it is coming from affluent communities to less affluent communities. I know here in the Los Angeles area, it's coming from some of the predominantly affluent white communities, and the firearms are being used in communities of color that are less affluent. So there's no real tracing of that information, but if you look at the end result, you can come up with a very distinct conclusion to that. Again, I can't share all the information because I'm barred because of the Tierhart Amendment and our agreement with the city, but the police department is aware the specific dealers that these firearms are coming from, their address, and what communities they're coming from. And again, City of Rochester doesn't have any firearms dealers, so they're coming from other areas, specifically around Monroe County.
So let me follow up with that, brother, just to reiterate, because you might not be here when I said it earlier. When we released this report last year in 2023, it was an unredacted report. In our report, we had that, what you're talking about. 48 hours before we released the report, the federal government told us, ATF said to us, to the city, because this report was by the city, that we had to redact that report. We could not release the fullness of that report because of they touted that DR amendment, that we could not release the names, and those names identify those affluent areas as opposed to the inner city, which historically we have heard that the corner stores are where they're getting all of these guns, right? That's what, but we haven't gotten any intel that I'm aware of, right? To establish that. That's just what I'm being told, right? We haven't got any intel to establish that. So until we get that actual evidence, we can't pinpoint that.
My last question is, transparency or the lack thereof causes two problems. One, there is no reason to ever keep something away. And when you do keep something away, a person comes up with their own angle of what's happening. As far as I can see, when you have a shooting in Buffalo that targets a particular race, and the race of the person who shot was talking to a law enforcement officer of a particular race. And then you have people in a local airport community who were members of the January 6th insurrection. And then you have ATF saying, you can't say this. And then you have police chiefs going down to Washington, D.C. and come back with no information they can tell us. And then the only information your data trace report is giving me is that it's killing people that match the race that I'm in. So my question is, what is the purpose of your trace report if everything that can make a difference is redacted?
Thank you. So, Steve, you want to touch on some of that?
Yeah, I'll kind of start it off, and I know, Councilmember, you can kind of finish it up there. So the redaction is very, very frustrating. The report was written for the city, and I consider the city all of you. It was written for the citizens to provide information to you to knowledge is power. Transparency in government is power to the people. So yeah, that's very frustrating, and I feel for you there. I can't control what ATF did. All we can do is do the report that we were asked and provide it to the city, and it was redacted. However, that was the information that was provided to the public, as frustrating as it is. The police department and the city do have the unredacted information, and it provides a action template for the police department to move forward with. It's just unfortunate that most of the guns that are, if not all of them, are coming from outside the city of Rochester, because Rochester doesn't have any firearm dealers. But they are aware of it, and that's why one of the major recommendations is the repeal of the Tierhart Amendment, and in order to provide that trace information and other information about the sources of firearms to the community, to the public, so we can start taking action with that. Council member?
Give it up for Steve. Give it up for Steve. Thank you, Steve. We're closing now. I'll just say this. In order to, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results, right? So what we're trying to do is to do the right thing, but we're doing it differently. Meaning, we're addressing the elephant in the room. There are a lot of people who didn't even know, including myself, had never heard of the TR amendment, never knew it existed, never knew that was stopping and prohibiting us from being transparent and getting information out. Knowledge is power. Now we're empowering our citizens to know this isn't an election year. There are federal representatives who are running, looking for your vote and for your support. Now you have a tool and an equipment to say, hey, how do you feel about this? This is a federal situation. You're a federal representative. What is your take on this? I get asked my take on city issues all the time. These other people should be held accountable for the issues that they are a part of and that they're accountable to as well. And so this is a piece of equipment and a tool that we're giving our citizens to say, when they come and ask to your churches, and when they come to your places of worship, in your houses of whatever, of assemblies, etc., and they're asking for your vote, you haven't asked too. You haven't asked too, right? That they should be able to address. And if they can't address it, then you get people in there who can address the issues in which the transparency that we deserve, because this is evidence. This is evidence. It's evidence of who's killing our people, and it deserves to be on the open data portal like all the other information is, instead of the name of just the name of the person, what street they got shot. Tell me where that gun came from too. I want to know that. Every shooting, I want to know, where did that gun come from, right? Then when we start seeing patterns of all these guns keep coming from the same corner store, they keep coming from the same gun dealer, they keep coming from the same place, then they get shut down. Right. That's just common sense to me. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't been hearing that conversation in the community. Now we're having that conversation, right? In this community. That other communities, do you know right now, the mayor in Baltimore, he's suing ATF
because he can't even, the data that we got, that got redacted, he can't even get the unredacted data.
Wow. Wow.
He can't even get what we gave you. He can't even get that. So he's suing now, Mayor Brandon Scott. You can Google this. He's suing ATF now for the data that we got and gave that he can't get. They won't give to him. And so we're a little ahead. I won't say light years because we still got too many homicides. We still got too many people dying. Until we have nobody dying and nobody getting killed, shot. Nothing, we got to keep working. So with that being said, the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition is our table is open for anybody who is like-minded. Anybody who's like-minded, who wants to educate, advocate, and eradicate against gun violence in our city. Before I came to city council, we didn't have such a thing that existed. Since the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, now we have a homicide response mobile unit. Now we have a crisis intervention team. Now we're doing, city government didn't do human services, the county did human services. City government pick up the trash, they take you to jail, they do, things, the potholes, fire department, police department, etc. But we did not do human services. That wasn't, city government didn't do that. We now do human services. We changed the name of the department from Recreation and Drives, Department of Recreation and Youth, to the Department of Recreation and Human Services. So now that is a result of some of the work myself and my colleagues and these mayors have been doing since Daniel proved. Okay, so we have made some strides, but we got a lot more work to do. And we are equipped and we are encouraged, because this work is very daunting. And a lot of people who do this work get burned out very, very quickly, because with the cameras are normally here. You know why they're not here? Because they're dealing with a shooting on Lao right now. Okay, so no, I'm just saying this story needs to be told. But I'm just saying the reason why they've been coming to all of our sessions, because we're dealing with violence even as we're speaking. It's happening. Amen. And so the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, we meet every second Monday at City Hall and City Council chambers. Next Monday will be our monthly meeting. Every second Monday at 6 p.m. Meetings are about an hour. They're hybrid. They're also streamed on the City Council YouTube, or you can log on from Zoom. If you contact myself or Dassy, we'll get you that Zoom link information. If you're not already in our email distribution chain, please see Dassy before you leave. She will make sure that she gets your email and that she gives you our information, and you can be a part of this coalition and these conversations as we continue. We're getting ready to put on a big youth conference. We're going to get our young people together and have dialogue and really hear from them and really let them kind of lead in this space around gun violence and how it impacts them and the various things we can do to assist our young people. That's going to be in July. We're really excited about that. We're getting ready to host also another hearing to our law enforcement. And at this hearing, we're going to ask them about, what are you doing around being transparent? How are you using this data that you have that other people don't have, but you got it? So how are you using this data? Oh, by the way, what about these corner stores? We're getting intel that corner stores are doing. We're going to ask these tough questions, and we want them to be able to answer, not just in front of us, but these are going to, all my meetings I do are public. So when you talk about transparency, I'm the only, and I don't say this to pat myself on the back, I'm just saying it because it's the truth. I'm the only council member, every meeting I host, every meeting I've ever done is both in person and streaming. Our council meetings aren't even like that. Only our council meetings, where I speak to council meetings, which I'm advocating that they be streamed, are not streamed, and they should be public, because they're the most important meetings, because that's the people talking, right? But those meetings are not streamed. They're not public, right? And the mayor doesn't have to attend those meetings. How do you not have to attend the most important meeting, which is the people?
Right.
Talking. Does that make any sense? That doesn't make any sense. But we as council, we listen to everything, and we just had a historical meeting a couple months ago. We had over 150 people speak, and we were there past midnight. So you know, these are the things that we advocate for. We have various meetings, partners. We have very many committees that you can sign up for to be a part of. But once again, we thank you for your time. This is the last of the 3 Truth About Crime violence, crime, guns in Rochester, but it's not the last of these discussions. We are committed to continue these discussions, continue these circles of healing, because I think we need to transition into that space of these circles of healing and really start having more dialogue around the other elements that impact us around gun violence, because that's what I sense in my spirit that I'm getting more so out of these sessions that we've been having. You're more than welcome to go on the City of Council YouTube page and share this session and the other sessions to friends, family. If you have solutions that we have not thought of, like we heard from today, several solutions that we have not, we've captured that. It's captured on video, it's captured that. We're capturing that. We're gonna try to implement and use as much as that we possibly can, because it's helpful. And we want to make sure that our information is coming from the people. That's why we were intentional about coming out to the community, right? Bearing ourselves to this community to see the things that you're thinking about when you're going through, as opposed to sitting in the ivory tower thinking what we think you need, or what we think you're thinking about, or what we think or believe you're going through. No, we come out here with you because we are with you to say, this is what we have, this is the information we have up to this far. We don't agree with all of it. We want this information to be fully public to the public. We want it to be annual, and we want the information and the data to be as consistent on the open data portal as the other information that you're sharing as well too. That is our plight. That is what we're asking you to help us and join in with us to do. And we're so grateful and thankful. I'm going to ask our pastor to come up, lead us out in prayer. Pastor Jonathan, thank him for opening the doors to us tonight. Pastor Jonathan for opening up the door to us. We're planning to use these 3 locations that we've been having our meeting in. Maybe I'm going to talk to these pastors. We're going to pray about it, but I know their hearts. We're going to open up. I just feel God leading us in the very near future to start some healing sessions, collective community, bring in some experts. We have one here tonight. Patricia Williams-McGay is with us tonight, licensed clinician. We're going to bring in some experts. We're going to unpack some of this stuff. We really do. We really need to do that, and in a safe environment, in a professional way, to deal with this, because we're all hurting, even if we don't recognize it, but we are all impacted by what's going on in our community.
Well, since you're for transparency, are you going to be more responsive in your emails? Because you said that you are for the city council meet or the speaker council meetings being live streamed, but when I have voiced that to y'all through email correspondences, you are mute. Jose Feo even, do it as an insult that some of the council members don't respond to any of my emails. It's only like Stanley Martin, Mary Lucan, and at the time Jose Feo.
Yeah, he just said that. He wants to do it.
Yeah, I
just want to make sure he's not just talking to yanking his chain. He's a grown man, ma'am. He just can't run himself there now. I hear it better than something. I hear it. So you really cool tell real quick. I hear it.
I can't, I'm not going to speak to a particular email or what, I don't know, you talking about Jose Pio, he's not even there anymore. So I don't know when I can't confirm that I even received what you're talking about. What I can say to you is what I said. I stand by what I said today. Right. So that's all I can say. I stand by what I said today, and that's it. And that's on YouTube. That's public. So that's public. I've made my statement publicly. So I made a public statement, and I stand on that. If an email, I get a lot of emails, so I'm sorry if that did slip by. I apologize, because I get tons of emails, and I don't necessarily respond to everyone. That's just, unfortunately, that's how much I get. And I do have staff too that's not here with me, so I can't confirm whether or not we received that or not. But what I can tell you is that I do stand behind those meetings being public. At this time, Pastor.
Thank you. If you will, we'll all just stand and close out. Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot. God bless you. For all those that came out, I pray that we all got some kind of clarity, any kind of type of clarity that we can take and run with, so to speak, and we can build